Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just give a couple of minutes so that everyone who's due to attend has arrived, and then I'll go through all the structure and what we're going to cover today. But from NOCN, it's a warm welcome to our presentation on Level 2 Extended Technical Occupational Entry Qualifications, which is quite a mouthful. Just give it another minute or so. We've got a few people in. There are more on the list, so I'll give a few, just another minute before we start. Okay, I think we'll get started there. So I shall just click the slides on. Hopefully everybody can see those slides, and then we shall begin. So, like I say, thank you very much for attending, and a warm welcome to NOCN's webinar this afternoon on the new technical occupational entry qualifications. There are a couple of us from the product development team on the webinar today. So myself, Jonathan Alton, I'm doing the presenting and the talking, but equally as importantly, my colleague Lisa Hill is on the chat and in the Q&A, so that if there are questions that come up while listening to the presentation, please feel free to put those in the Q&A in the chat, and Lisa will be able to respond to those accordingly. The usual first question we always get asked is, when will the slides be available, and etc. etc. So once the presentation's all finished, slides are all put together, transcripts done, and that will be made available to everyone who's attended and put themselves forward in terms of that. I think that's all the basics that I need to get covered. So I'll start to go through the presentation and explain what we're all about and what we're doing. So here's today's plan. We're going to look at the an overview of the post-16 reforms and how that impacts into these technical occupational entry qualifications. It's an awful long name. I have colleagues who call them TOEs. I'm not quite sure I like that, but we'll get there eventually. I'm going to talk mainly today about our Level 2 provision for this academic year, 2025 to 2026. We'll then look at the practical units in the qualification, looking at what the content is, looking how they're assessed, and the support materials we have available. Moving on from that, we look at the theory units, and again, content, what the assessments are looking like, and again, the wide range of support materials that are there for those. We'll briefly kind of recap and go over the assessment principles around the qualifications. We'll have a look at the support, and I thought I'd finish off just explaining where we are currently in terms of funding for Level 3 provision. As I said, the Q&A and the chat's available, so Lisa will be able to answer those as and when, and you are able to kind of rate questions as well and bump them up the list, so that should help. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end for some questions and answers once I finish the presentation. So I'll start with a kind of an overview of the post-16 reform. It's always difficult to tell exactly what everybody knows so far, but as part of the last government and the kind of the IFATE control, there was a desire to make a big change and overview to all post-16 qualifications, initially with Level 2 and Level 3 qualifications in scope. We have a large number of those in terms of training qualifications like I'm speaking about today. We also have the MVQs, and I'll certainly mention those later, but the main focus of today is to focus on the training qualifications. Why did the reforms take place? Well, the government's aim, and the DFE and IFATE as they were, Skills England as they are now, their plan was to have greater industry scrutiny to qualifications. That's making sure that the knowledge, skills, and behaviours, the kind of the core aspects of the apprenticeship and occupational standards, the things that employers believe are most relevant to the students, were being correctly covered, and that the content and curriculum was matching the needs. Additionally to this, there was also a consideration of streamlining the number of qualifications and the type of technical qualifications that there are. We, like other awarding organisations, have been through the process of what we had to do to prove our qualifications were fit for purpose and the kind of quality checks that took place. So we had to prove support from industry, that's employers, industry bodies, and others. We had to demonstrate that we covered the content, like I say, those occupational standards. And then the final hurdle to cross was ensuring that we passed the series of quality tests that were started by IFIT and finished off by Skills England and Ofqual to ensure that these qualifications were fit for purpose. There is kind of currently a bit of a pause going on. Once the general election was announced, was last summer now, wasn't it? There was a kind of pause on the current reform system. And then 2025, the Secretary of State kind of announced kind of further focus review reforms. That kind of is encapsulated in the kind of curriculum and assessment review, which is looking at the entirety of level 2 qualification provision in England. So that is a phenomenally large piece of work. As awarding organisations, we're expecting to hear the initial findings from that in the autumn. Once we get any more information, obviously, either through the product team ourselves or through our business development team, we will let centres know as to what's happening and what's going on. It's very much we're kind of a waiting game at the moment in terms of what's going to happen going forward. When the original forms were put in place, there was going to be a number of windows and cycles. We went through the first couple of those for level 3 and the first one for level 2. And then once this kind of pause came in, we kind of left in a bit of limbo as to what to do next. So in order to get qualifications funded at the moment, we kind of get a once a year opportunity to submit. Hopefully we'll get some more clarity, like I say, in the autumn. In terms of how we approach the reforms, we tried as very much as possible to keep everything as similar to the previous iterations of our qualifications. You know, we've had the last version of these training qualifications live for 4 or 5 years. They are successfully being completed by the learners, so we didn't want to make a huge change. And I guess the kind of real focus of what I'm going to speak about today is all about how we've tried to keep things in the kind of status quo, trying to keep things as close as we possibly could to how the qualifications looked prior to these reforms. So that means that in the main, we've tried to use similar types of assessment. We've tried to use the same kind of qualifications and unit content. The kind of real changes is a slightly more developed, robust assessment system, use of resets, and some assessment controls that we have in place. There is now more guidance for centres on assessments and how to deliver them. And probably the key change that we have made is our qualifications are now graded. We made a decision within the team that as these are practical qualifications, the grading very much sits within the practical units. So across the whole qualifications, there are obviously a number of units that make up the full qual. The graded units are the ones which are practical ones, and that means the learners get an opportunity then to get a distinction grade for their practical skills as well as their knowledge. So hopefully give them a fair opportunity to show that they've, somebody who excels can get that slightly higher grade. Right, this takes us into our list of technical occupational entry qualifications. This naming convention comes from, well, it originally came from the Secretary of State or the government in terms of a ministerial decision. So technical occupational entry does not mean they're entry qualifications. They are level 2, the ones I'm going to speak about for most this afternoon. The fact that it is extended is the fact that it has some employability aspects embedded within the qualification. So some kind of softer skills included in there. And that's what the extended means. It doesn't mean the qualification's any larger than it needs to be. It's part of the overall kind of naming provision that came from, say, IFATE. We've got 4 qualifications at level 2 in the training qualifications. bricklaying, carpentry and joinery, carpenters and joiners, painting and decorating, and plastering. As you can see on that screen there, the carpenter joinery one is split into two pathways, site carpentry and architectural joinery, and the plastering one is again split into two, fibrous and solid. And that was just so that we could match and ensure that our content coverage reflected the occupational standard. So in the same way as the endpoint assessment is split in those two ways, then our qualifications split as well. The qualifications level 2 have got a wide range of funding streams. So these qualifications are funded for 16 to 19 EFA, adult skills, free courses for jobs, tailored learning, and they are funded at least until the 31st of July 2028. That is a set date given to us by Skills England. They expect that all qualifications are reviewed within a 3-year cycle. So these qualifications went live on the 1st of August. Therefore, 31st of July 2028 is 3 years from that starting point. So guaranteed funding for those 3 years. And then as part of our usual NOCN review process, we will be ensuring our qualifications still fit for purpose. And we will go through a review process with Skills England at that point, in which case they will then decide whether our qualifications are still suitable for funding or not. We're very confident that we shouldn't have any issues come July 2028. I'll focus on the practical content next, looking at each of the kind of trades briefly in turn in terms of what the actual content is in terms of units. And then I'll also have a look at what we've got as a sample assessment, so we can go through requirements are in there. Anybody who's delivered NOCN qualifications in the past will hopefully see a real similarity between the last versions of the training qualifications and these new ones. As I said, as much as possible, we tried to keep structures and content as similar as previous versions. However, because of the knowledge and skills statements within the occupational standard, it did affect which units we could have as mandatory and which units we could have as optional or additional. So that's possibly the only large change that we've had is in some areas there are additional mandatory units that in previous versions were optional. We've also had to lose a large number of credited optional units, which are now in the additional unit category because they didn't map directly into the occupational standard. So things such as manual handling, mixing materials, units which we've had for a number of years in previous qualifications, because they weren't explicitly covered in the occupational standard, they're now classed as additional units rather than optional ones. But as I go through the trades here, we'll see in turn that these should be unit titles that are very familiar to anybody who's delivered construction training qualifications. So, bricklaying, cavity walls and solid walls, both those units have some embedded setting out requirements involved. And then centres can choose one of masonry cladding, thin joint or repair and maintain masonry as an optional unit. There's no optionals in the two carpentry and joinery pathways, but to our mind, they do provide the full coverage of everything that a site carpenter or an architectural joiner will need to be doing. So there's the first fix, second fix, structural carcassing, and use of power tools for site carpentry, and then for the architectural joinery, the kind of the 3 stages of setting out, marking out, and manufacturing. And additionally to that, setting up and operating of cutting and shaping machinery. For painting and decorating, we've got 3 mandatory units that you can see there: preparing surfaces, applying paint, and applying standard coverings. And our last version, we had a wide range of optional units around different types of decorative finishes. For this particular version of qualification now, we've had to put them all into one unit. So that's the optional unit to produce decorative finishes. As you can see, there are 2 other optionals that could be chosen, non-standard coverings and specialist paint systems. For solid plastering, we've got 3 mandatories you can see there. So repairing background surfaces, applying plaster and applying render, and a slightly wider range of optional units. With a fibrous pathway, there is 1 mandatory, which is the large, produce, position and secure. fibrous plastic components, but then learners are able to pick and choose from a wide range of the solid plastering units as optionals. Okay, well, I'll look at the actual assessment structure next. So I will go through a sample assessment in a moment, so you can see all the different elements that are involved. But this slide just summarizes some information. And the key thing is this is a very similar model to what I've used previously. So there is a single synoptic practical task per unit. This means there's only one piece of assessment documentation that as a centre each learner needs to complete, and that forms their assessment for this unit. Within them, there's a practical task and there's some short answer questions. I think one of the questions I've been asked a few times by centres over recent weeks is particularly pertinent to Carpentry and Joinery, where if you consider first fix operations, there are a number of different tasks involved in first fix operations. Our assessment design means there is one assessed piece. So while centres will be delivering a wide range of things around first fix, stud work and that kind of content, the key thing to remember is for the actual assessment, it's just a single practical task that needs to be covered, and that comes in the formal assessment paper. I've already mentioned that the qualifications are graded, so it is pass and distinction, set around the tolerances. It's the key thing to get the distinction grades and the pass grades for the practical aspect. And within the underpinning knowledge questions, it's achieving a number of correct questions that decides whether it's a pass or a distinction. In terms of kind of the day-to-day management of the assessment process, so all of the current live assessments are available in the NOCN vLearn Hub. It's categorized into level 2 and then each trade individually. Please download the most up-to-date version of those assessments prior to your learners completing their assessment. So what we advise is no more than a week in advance to download those assessments. They will change a couple of times during the year, and we will put out a bulletin, and it'll be within our NOCN newsletter when the assessments for these qualifications have been changed. So make sure that you've got access to that. But yeah, make sure you download no more than a week in advance, and make sure you get the most up-to-date version of the assessment for when your learners are ready to sit that test. By having the individual unit assessments, it does allow you to stagger across the academic year when your learners do the assessments. So you may want to, from a site carpentry idea, may want to start by doing the first fix initially, move on to do the second fix and the structural, however you want to manage your curriculum. You can then drop in those practical assessments over the course of the time they're on programme. You don't have to wait till the very end of the year and do all the assessments at the end. All assessments are available on demand throughout the year, so pick and choose when you do them, when your learners are ready. But as I say, make sure you always download the most up-to-date version. Assessments completed in general workshop areas. We haven't moved into anything more draconian than just saying a centre, training provider, college workshop. We don't need anything more than that in terms of a kind of quiet zone or an area which is segregated from other learners. It's all about the learners demonstrating their practical skills. If they're on a building site, then it's going to be a slightly noisy environment with others around them. So actually completing assessments in a live workshop in a college or training provider is perfectly acceptable in terms of an assessment environment. All assessments are marked internally by centre staff, internally verified, and then sampled as part of our usual EQA visits. Right, so what I've got here is the current sample version for one of the plastering assessments. Some key points in there I've already mentioned, but yeah, make sure you always download the most up-to-date version. The assessments that are held in NOCN's vLearn Hub are password protected, and obviously those passwords are to make sure that only the correct people have access to the assessments. And if you need the passwords, contact our customer service team and they'll happily provide those for you. There will also be resit questions and resit practicals available if you have learners who don't achieve first time. And again, they'll be available in the hub. And the final piece before I start showing you page by page, All of these assessments are available as PDFs or as Word forms. So whichever format works best for you and your learners, you can choose accordingly to deliver these. So I'll go through the assessment. First page is fairly straightforward and obvious, but who the centre is, who the learner is, sign to say it's their own work, assessor signature, and obviously there is space there for the quality assurance for internal and external quality assurance. And perhaps most importantly for the learners, at the bottom of the page there, they can get their overall grade, a tick in the box for whether that's distinction or a pass, hopefully not a fail. Within each of the sample assessments, like I said earlier, we do have a bit more information around assessment controls now. So there's a time permitted on there. It talks about the kind of assessment location. It talks about who's appropriate in terms of being a supervising the assessment, and it also explains about the grading requirements. We've tried to keep this as simple as possible, so hopefully we agree. In order to get a pass overall, learners need to hit all of the pass criteria. In order to get just the practical task, in order to get distinction, they need to meet all of the distinction criteria, this particular test, and then that is covered on a kind of test by test basis. So this page 2 is important there to make sure you are marking according to those grading rules. And as you can see at the bottom there, it does show you need 10 questions correct for a pass and 13 questions correct for a distinction. Lisa's on this call, so I feel I should really kind of praise her for this next page. She had a fantastic amount of work to do to get all of our qualifications mapped across to occupational standards and to show how we're covering those within assessments and within units. So every single assessment document will show which particular knowledge and skills and behaviours are being covered within those assessments, just to show the coverage of what you've got, of what's there, and also helps in terms of making sure that those learners are being prepared for the workplace. The learners themselves get some instructions and a brief. There's a room specification. This one's a plastering question, and then there's some kind of guidance as to what the steps they need to follow in order to be successful. Assessment criteria are covered, and as I said earlier, you can see there the fact we've got the tolerances in there: 5 mil for a pass, 3 mil for distinction. There is in this case, but a simple and straightforward diagram for the plastering. We have some more complicated ones for the brickwork and carpentry and joinery. Learners are expected to have a level of planning involved, so making a list of the tools and equipment that they need, the materials that they need. If you spin your head 90 degrees, there's a risk assessment or risk activity, same as we had in the previous versions. And then as assessors or tutors in college and training providers, this is the most important page for those individuals, ticking whether the learner's got pass, a distinction or not, and you can see which criteria the passes and distinctions are available to. And again, we explain how many passes and how many distinctions needed for an overall grade. There are knowledge questions in the same as we always had for the last version. These can be done on paper by learners, or they could be done on as a Q&A session one-to-one with their tutor. In that case, make sure you read the questions exactly as they are here and don't guide the learners, but those questions are there, very much short answer, with the underpinning key information that they need. And again, say 10 questions for a pass for this one, 13 for a distinction. There are resits available if a learner doesn't achieve first time. We've also included the review page. So again, this is not a mandatory aspect of the assessment, but this is just in there so that once a learner has completed their assessment, that kind of tutorial session or that feedback can be given and target setting can be built out from that. And that, folks, is an example of an assessment. There are obviously one per unit, and please feel free to go into the hub, have a look at the sample ones. They're all available in the vLearn hub, so you can see those for your particular trade. In terms of support material, we've got quite a lot of existing material that we've used previously that are still there and still perfectly accessible and really useful to use in centres. None of the support material is mandatory. It is only there to help with delivery. We appreciate that there are some very experienced tutors around the country who don't need our support material. That's fine. Don't feel as though you have to use it. It's just put there by the team to give you a helping hand in terms of what to deliver. So there's a couple of example ones you can see there: the cavity wall for bricklaying, they still work for carpentry, and a sample one there. The way we set up our training practical booklets, it does allow the learners to do the initial assessment themselves. So once they've built their wall or whatever their task is, they can mark their own work first before you as the tutor can come in and verify whether you agree with what their thoughts are. But they're all designed to be of a similar standard to where they need to be towards their end tests. And so we've got those for across the trade areas. So that was the practical units. We'll move on and talk about the theory ones next. And again, we've kind of split these up so that you can, if you require, deliver these at different times during the year, or you can deliver them at the end of the course, however it feels fit in terms of your delivery. But I'll go through each of those theory units in turn. I guess one of the real changes we've had between this version of our level 2 training quals and the previous one is the fact that construction principles, which was previously an optional unit, is now a mandatory one. It's the kind of the core understanding of construction principles. So perfectly happy to have that as the a mandatory aspect. Health and safety is there. Communication, information, quantities and communication. No, information, quantities and communications, a mouthful, is there as a mandatory one as well. And then environmental awareness, sustainability construction, and some soft skill ones. And we'll look at those in turn in a moment. But the construction principles unit, if a learner has done this as part of their level 1 qualifications in the past, then you will be able to kind of transfer that unit straight across, so they don't have to do it again. If a learner's completed that as an optional, as a level 1 qualification, they can use the exact same unit. They don't need to resit the test. They can move that straight across. The contents are the key 3 strands of construction. Get the information, understand how the structure of the building is constructed, understand how the inside of the building is constructed. It's a multiple choice test, 30 questions, 45 minutes, graded pass fail, and after some communication with employers and a few trade bodies, a 70% pass mark was agreed as being a suitable level for that. We regularly review questions, and the question banks will change over the course of the year as questions are reviewed, swapped in and swapped out, just so that questions don't remain predictable. We want to make sure there's a nice big bank of questions to call upon. In terms of support materials for this, we've got, I think there's 9 work booklets. You can see on the right-hand side screen there, I've got some screenshots of what they look like. So there's some short answer questions, there's some diagrams that require labeling and that kind of aspect. We've also got 9 delivery presentations. They're currently out for review. They'll go live in Davila Hub towards hopefully by Friday, if not early next week, and they cover the entirety of the content. So again, these aren't mandatory. They're there. Support material centres can use them or not use them. No issues to us whether you use them or not, but they are there hopefully to help you to deliver that aspect. For this unit, we've also got some true and false quizzes that have been around for a while. Again, these questions will be reviewed and updated over the next few months. But yeah, there is one true and false quiz for each of those 3 learning outcomes. So it gives full access then, and learners can get to see what the questions are going to be like. Obviously, these aren't the live questions in the test. We're not allowed to do that, but we try and keep things as close as possible to specification in these quizzes so that it gives the learners the best possible chance for success. The health and safety unit is the same as it was before. So again, if a learner's completed this in a previous qualification, it can be transferred straight across. It is a very comprehensive unit. There's kind of 15 learning outcomes there. You can see all the content that's available. It's a multiple choice, single multiple choice test, 45 questions, pass and fail. Pass mark is 80%, which is all part of the CSCS approval. So this can lead towards, doesn't instantly give a learner a CSCS card, but it provides the learner that gateway to getting a CSCS card. As with other units, we have got a phenomenal range of learner workbooks. So there are 15. I'm certainly not going to go through all 15 with you today. I don't have the time for that, but please feel free to dip into the hub and have a look at those. But those 15 learner workbooks cover the entirety of the course. Again, mainly short answer questions, and it just provides a support mechanism if you want to use those with your learners. Next aspect is the true and false quizzes again. So same as we had for the last lot, for the construction principles, there are true and false quizzes, and again, one of those per learning outcome. And there's an example of what's in there. So you can see they're all true and false. It's a key statement. Learners need to know whether that's true or whether that's false, and it goes through on screen. The construction information quantities communications unit is focused around those 4 key content areas. So interpreting and producing construction information, estimating quantities, and communication. Single learner work booklet that can be completed in the college setting. It's marked internally by centres again. And for this unit, and the same as we have for the other, we have developed a wide range of support materials. So there are 8 presentations there that cover the entirety of that unit. So it's everything is there in a box. If you want to use it for delivery, again, not mandatory, but they are there to help you with your delivery. These PowerPoints are editable in the hub as well. So if you download the PowerPoint, you can, by all means, make small alterations to match, the area of the country where you work or the individual needs of your learners. They're there as a starting point for you. Say they're available for free in the vLearn hub. The environmental unit is a very short one, focusing on use of resources, basic sustainable construction methods, how construction impacts the environment, small section on waste management and how we can reduce the impact. It's a single assessment, again, like the previous one, completed in controlled conditions, and again, marked in centres. And with this one, again, it's a slightly smaller unit, so there aren't as many support materials, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teaching PowerPoints that, again, they're available for centres to use as part of their delivery, but like I say, not mandatory. I mentioned the soft skills units a little bit earlier, so there are 3 of them. This is kind of the employability and all those aspects. Depending on which of the 4 trade areas it is, there's a slight difference. I think one of the trade areas, and I should know this back top of my head, it's escaping at the moment. There's one of the trade areas has 2 of these units in, all the rest have 3, but obviously you can see that within the core specs. There are 3 very short workbooks of the assessment for these, and again, completed in controlled circumstances. You can see the content that's in there. It's that starting point for learners to get themselves aware of what our industry is like and the ways in which they can get employment into that. So, being able to understand those aspects is key. They are very short units, not a huge amount of content, and there we are just starting to get the learners thinking about that. So there isn't as many support materials. There is 1 presentation per unit. So everything is there in order to make sure if you want to deliver that using our materials, they're there. But again, if you'd rather use your own, please feel free to download our unit specification from the website, develop your own materials, no problem at all. Okay, I've covered quite a lot there. I just want to kind of pull out some of the key assessment principles over the next few minutes, just to show what's kind of important in terms of delivering the assessments for these. So in terms of the practical, like I said earlier, each individual practical has its own assessment, which synoptically assesses the content of the entire unit. So it's 1 practical per unit. All the assessment materials designed by NOCN and available on the NOCN hub, so you can download them. Centres cannot devise their own assessments for these. They have to use the NOCN ones. We appreciate that at times there may be issues of getting availability of materials. Obviously, if you come across that, your first port of call is to let your external quality assurer know, and then in most cases they'll find a resolution so that the assessment principles aren't damaged, the learner gets a fair test, but obviously isn't going to cause issues in terms of unavailability of materials. I've said it earlier, download assessments no more than a week before they're due to be completed to ensure you got the most recent version. So they will change 2 or 3 times during the year. We will let centres know when they change, but please don't print off 400 versions at the start of the year and use them throughout. I've said already, but the practical aspect can take place in your usual workshop area, so you don't need a distinct assessment area for these. Learners can continue to work in normal workshop space. The underpinning knowledge questions, supervised by a tutor, but it doesn't have to be in full exam conditions. If they are handwriting them, obviously they can do that in a classroom, they can do that in the workshop. If it is a one-to-one set a Q&A session with the tutor, and obviously we'd expect that to be done in a kind of quiet area. Additionally to that, if you are doing the questions as a Q&A between the tutor and the learner, please record that Q&A so that it's there available for our EQA team to sample if required. All of the practical assessments are initially marked by centre staff yourselves, quality assured by your internal quality assurance teams, and then sampled as part of our usual EQA activity. And I say one of the differences between this version of the qualification and the previous ones is there will be resits available so that if the learner doesn't achieve first time, there's a second assessment they could do. For the non-practical, the kind of theory units, again, all assessment materials designed by NOCN, all available on the vLearn Hub, and they are the ones that must be used in order to record the learner's assessments. Can't be centre generated for level 2 qualifications. We've trialed some of we've trialed the assessments. There is plenty of time for the learners to complete these, and learners can split their completion across multiple sittings. It's not a formal kind of GCSE type exam completed in controlled circumstances, but you can able to do it in a normal classroom. It doesn't need an external invigilator or anything like that. And as long as the tutor collects in the learner's assessments at the end of each individual session, they can be done across multiple sittings. Another key aspect in terms of these is that learners are permitted to bring notes with them into some of the assessments. Have a look at the assessment guidance on each individual assessment in advance to see what learners are permitted to do. Okay, other support. Just one one quick document, one very important document actually, and again, another thank you to Lisa, who's put a lot of time and effort into these. Each individual one of the qualifications has its own centre guide, which is available in the hub. So this is in addition to the qual spec. It provides a bit more clarity and a bit more detail around some of the key things that you would need in order to deliver the qualification. So it talks about the qualification purpose and structure. There is a comprehensive list of tools, materials, and equipment. We think we've got everything covered in there, everything you should possibly need to deliver the course. I guess, as always, the situations use a professional judgment in terms of volumes of materials, volumes of tools, equipment. It explains the kind of assessment area preparation you need. It talks about assessment controls. There is guidance on how to mark and assess them, as well as how to submit the results into NOCN using the Quarto platform. And so almost the end of me talking now, just a couple more slides looking at the kind of level 3 and where we are in terms of that. So level 3 and level 2 were both part of the government reform process. There was a statement released by the government just in early 2025 around funding for level 3 qualifications, and they initially said they were only going to fund site carpentry. Thankfully, unfortunately, we were able to get our level 3 approved. Because we have pathways within the same qualification, it does mean we have funding approved for the architectural. But I'll look at funding in a moment, and I'll also go on and have a quick look at other possibilities we have in terms of what's going to happen over the next 2 years. So for this academic year, because initially the T level was seen as the most important level 3 qualification, we weren't able to submit our new qualifications for funding for 16 to 19-year-olds. A large frustration for ourselves and other rewarding organisations. So the new NOCN qualification, the level 3 technical occupational entry for craft carpenters and joiners, site carpentry and architectural joinery, that is available for adult learners only. However, if you do have learners who are 16 to 19 looking to level 3 carpentry and joinery, our old existing level 3 diploma is still funded for the next 12 months. We'll see what happens in terms of government plans after that stage. So for this academic year, those are the options in terms of funded qualifications. So level 3 diploma, the old version, 16 to 19-year-olds, or for adult learners, you can do either the site carpentry or the architectural joinery level 3 qualifications. I said earlier, we only get a once a year change now in terms of funding, so we are well positioned in terms of funding for 2026 at level 3. Level 3 occupational entry for craft bricklayers has been approved by Skills England and should get full approval for funding, and that will be available from August 2026. We have also pushed in order to get our new craft carpentry and joinery level 3 qualification funded for both 16 to 19 and for adult learners. So just a quick finishing point there of where we're going in terms of level 3. Currently, as I say, there are no more cycles predicted by the government, so any other level 3 paint and decorating or plastering, we aren't able to submit those at the moment to see if we can get approval and funding. As soon as we can, we will go out to centres and look for your support then in order to make sure we can get those qualifications funded. And I think, folks, that's it from me in terms of the presentation. I'll stop sharing. I can now finally see everyone else back in the room. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes before we come to the end of the webinar. Are there any questions from anybody? Oh, Teresa. Oh, we seem to have a problem with the microphones. Just wondering if I can get that activated. If no, I can't. Can you put if possible, put the question to the chat? Sorry, Teresa, I can't re-able your mic. So still, yeah, the question still no level 3 for the academic year. Our qualification is still there, so the existing qualification is still available. But unfortunately, I say that government funding decision 6 months ago about only funding site carpentry at level 3 meant for 25-26 we haven't been able to secure any funding for that qualification for this year. In terms of alternatives, the old extended level 2 qualification is still funded, so that's a possibility. You could possibly draw down additional units from the level 3. It is a very frustrating position that we're in as an awarding organisation, and all other AOs in the same position, in that we cannot get quick resolution to funding questions and queries. Any other questions? Say, hopefully Lisa's been monitoring questions, etc., during the conversation as I've mumbled on for the presentation there, and everything has been covered. Like I say, you will get the slides, and the recording will be available. We'll send that out to those people who are signed up. If there are no further questions, I will thank you very much for your time. I hope you found that useful, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody. Thank you.